Every day, you and I get bombarded with negative news. And just like our bodies becomes what we eat, our minds become the information that we consume. If you want to stay positive, it's so important that you also listen to stories that inspires you and uplifts you. In this podcast, we interview world-leading experts dedicated to solving the world's most pressing problems. And if you stick around, I promise you will not only be as informed as if you watch the news, you will feel uplifted, inspired, and have more positive energy in your life. Welcome to Great.com Talks with. Hi and welcome. Today Great.com talks with Joey Hunziker, who is the Director of Young Adult Initiatives at the National Center for Learning Disabilities. And if you haven't heard of them before, they are a national policy and advocacy organization working to improve the lives of people with learning disabilities. And if you haven't done so already, you definitely want to press subscribe, either on YouTube or in your podcast app, because today we're going to speak not only with Joey, but also with Joseph, Abner, and Madison that are coming from the National Center. And we're going to learn about how we can make lives better for people with learning disabilities. So thank you all for coming on, and hi.
Hi, Neil.
Hi, Joey. So that was a brief introduction. And this is my first, how many are we here? 5, 6 way into you. So I'm really looking forward to this. How would you describe the National Center to someone that is not familiar with your organization?
Sure. So about 1 in 5 students in American schools today have a learning disability or an attention issue. So that's dyslexia, ADHD, auditory processing disorder. There's several of those disabilities out there. And our organization for the last 40 plus years has been working to protect and expand the rights of those students and ensure that our laws are just and equitable, and ensure that those students have the rights that they are destined to have under federal law here in the United States.
Wow.
We do a lot of other things too, but I think at the heart of our mission is to ensure that we create an equitable education system for students with learning disabilities.
That's so important because everybody's learning differently and have different needs. So it's so important that they get their rights protected. So what is if you could paint a picture of the problem then, why are they not giving the same chance and rights as other people?
It's a great question, and I will open it up to Joseph, Abner, and Madison, but I think the problem's pretty expansive. We have, the way in which schools operate has always struggled to represent and support the unique characteristics and qualities that students come into the classroom with. And I think sometimes people see a disability as a hindrance and not as, a living, breathing student who's sitting in front of a teacher asking for support because they learn differently. And I think, there's lots of issues that we work on related to school funding, to how students are able to get accommodations for their learning needs, how our school system recognizes and identifies students with disabilities, how colleges and universities support students along their journeys. I think something we've really been looking at recently is the post-high school careers of students with disabilities and how our workplaces and employers support students with accommodations and support. So I think the problem's pretty expansive, but I'd love to hear from the three of you what you also think, how you would define the problem.
Yeah, for sure. I would say that there's a wide range of discrepancy between what LD students need and what they are provided, both in and out of classrooms. And these ranges are unfortunately seen across socioeconomic class, race, and location. So our goal, hopefully, in an ideal world, by advocating for practical needed policy as well as enforcement and funding, we can at least attempt to ensure that this discrepancy is reduced.
Thank you so much, Joseph. And I'm curious then, what would you have liked to have experienced? What kind of support would you have liked to gotten that you didn't get when you were in school?
The support I would have loved to see when I was in younger years, not in college, was somebody really teaching me what my accommodations were. In kindergarten, or not kindergarten, but like in elementary school, you don't always need to know what they are. But I was diagnosed in an awkward stage of 5th grade because I needed to know what they were for middle school, but I was still in that, I'm new to this, so I don't even know what I need. And so as I got older, because I was a student who was in advanced classes, it was just kind of assumed, oh, I'll figure it out. I am still figuring it out, and I'm in college now. So just kind of a space to figure it out, and somebody saying, this is what you have, here's how it looks like.
I understand that very much. It got to be hard. I guess you felt alone as well when you weren't giving guidance and support, and you didn't really understand what was going on.
Yeah, my story really is that when I was really young in like kindergarten, I was in speech therapy, and then 5th grade, I was diagnosed with dyslexia and dysgraphia. So there's a sense of both of those. I felt alone, but I found that in NCLD, I have a community. And I think that's one of the best things, was to find that community.
I can imagine how important it is to feel supported by the organization, like with the National Center. And you're being a nice metaphor for that as well, by being 5 people in this conversation, that you are a community in a sense. So I'm curious with Abner, from your point of view, what kind of support would you have liked to have gotten that you didn't get?
I'd say the support of my parents. And this is why I always go to point one. Yes, we have these practical barriers, these problems that we are advocating as a group. But in a way, for me, it was my parents. When I was diagnosed with dyslexia at age 12, my parents had no idea what to do. And it always brings back memories whenever I talk about this. I grew up in Stockton, California, and for those who know Stockton, California, it's not a glamorous city. It's filled with poverty. It's filled with violence. So I grew up around that, and I think that having social awareness to these problems, for me at least, it's point one, and then comes all of these other actions for me. But yeah, that's the support of my parents, and for them to be aware of what dyslexia is or was. And that's what I'm fighting for today, to bring social awareness to colored communities.
Yeah, I can imagine. It seems like the awareness part is something all 3 of you have been struggling with together, and to feel, get more information,
It's interesting because, I remember sitting down, and my counselor told my mom that the only one that could figure it out was me. And, this goes back to what Madison was saying, was, the part was just like, figure it out yourself. It's we've done that, and we're still doing that. And, we're so happy to have Joy as our mentor and, be part of this NCLD family.
Yeah, I can imagine. So if I go back to Joey then, what do you want to give to students on top of the advice of you will have to figure it out on your own? What do you think is important?
So I don't want to give students anything. I want to change the system so that they're empowered. I want our system to recognize that their strengths are attributes, that their weaknesses are not things to attack, that students like Abner and Madison and Joseph have, so much innate strength and qualities that our system should recognize and not make them have to fight day in and day out for everything that they deserve. And, in terms of giving them things, I think creating a community where they feel comfortable and supported is something that we strive for with our Young Adult Leadership Council. But I'll say that I do very little in that regard. It's them making a community of themselves and being supportive and really teaching NCLD how to be good leaders for young adults like them.
Then I have a question for all of you. What do you wish that people without learning disabilities knew about people with learning disabilities?
I guess I have two things. The first thing is that I'm still capable of learning highly detailed, highly specific things, and that I may enjoy learning about those things a lot. I just need the tools to help me understand and learn about those things. And then the second is that impressively it takes more time, I feel like, for just about everything. And I'm already working to basically work my own brain to get things out. So to give me maybe those extra 30 seconds to let me get my thought out, or to give me the extended time I need on test, or don't assign me an essay today and expect me to turn around and give it to you tomorrow. So time and just understanding, I want to learn. I'm in the classroom because I want to learn. I care about my education. Just to give me the tools I need to be able to stay in that classroom.
I think that's a big difference from some of the prejudice I assume some people might have without knowing what it's like to be in your situation. Anyone else maybe have an answer to the same question? Joseph?
Yeah. One of my favorite quotes in education is by Arthur Fauché. And he says that the purpose of education is for students to realize their full human potential. So going back on what Madison said, just realizing that we're just as capable as other students in performing essential and non-essential tasks. And that perhaps our path to success, our path to leading the best life that we can might look very different than someone else.
Thank you.
For me, it's, along the lines that Madison said, that it takes time. And, just because we're pulled out of the classroom, to take tests or whatever, for whatever reason, it doesn't mean, that we're illiterate. It just means that we just need time, and our brains work differently. For me, it worked creatively. So, and there's nothing wrong with that, with having English time.
I think it's an interesting assumption that the schools have kind of assumed that everyone has the same brain. It would be like assuming in sports that everyone had the same body. It seems quite silly. Now, Joey, where do you see the National Center going in the next 5-10 years? How would you like to expand this community, and what would you like to advocate for?
That's a great question. We're doing a lot of deep thinking about that. We started that before the COVID pandemic, and the pandemic has accelerated that. How can our school systems and our legal system really change to support students with disabilities? I think over the next 5 to 10 years, we'll probably see, I hope, historic investment in public education in the United States. A huge expansion of access to post-high school pathways for students. That's something I think we will be focusing on, is ensuring that, once a student with a learning disability leaves high school, what are their options? Because right now we don't have good data. We don't collect a lot of good data to understand the pathways that students take. And that's something that I think we will try to investigate more. And then I think, so Madison, Abner, and Joseph are part of our Young Adult Leadership Council. We'll be creating, I think, an expanded series of programs to support young adults like them along a continuum of learning and development, and really building the leadership and advocacy skills of young adults along their lives. Becoming a lifelong advocate, I think, is critical. Things don't change overnight, so developing those skills is critical and important. So I think that's some of the areas where we'll focus.
It seems like the focus is centered around advocacy and spreading awareness. And imagine someone listening to this podcast now. What action steps can they take? Maybe both to support your organization, but also be that advocate, spread that awareness.
I mean, on our website, we're actively building more opportunities for people to engage on advocacy efforts, both for parents, young adults, hopefully educators in the future. I think I would say, as someone who does not have a learning disability, the first step is to listen and be responsive and empathetic, right? When students with learning disabilities tell you what they need, listen. Don't just shut them down and make assumptions because you have a professional degree that tells you something different. That would be my argument. So I think there's lots of ways that people can get involved, and I think being aware and conscious is more important than ever.
And we have a couple of more minutes. I want to ask the group, if someone is young and they find out that they have a learning disability, what would you like for them to know?
So I feel like I'm speaking both to my younger self and my little brother when I say this, is that it takes time for you to get adjusted and takes time for you to learn every little thing. I used to consider my learning disabilities like a monster or a curse. And now it's kind of like, I imagine it's like the Disney Monsters Inc. It's like, yeah, it can be really scary, but it's my little monster. It's adorable. And so it took me years to accept who I was and understand myself enough to be here and advocating. So it's okay if right now to those who are newly diagnosed, it's okay right now. You have no idea what you need. You have no idea what you want to ask for. It takes time, and that is perfectly okay.
Thank you for that. And I love the metaphor. And it takes time. I think that's a really important message. It seemed like Joseph wanted to say something.
Yeah, it's exciting. You get to experience life differently. But for the younger person, it can be quite daunting. Like, will I ever succeed? Will I ever achieve the same things that my peers are? And especially some of these students are so young when they first find out. I think the most important thing I would tell myself is I can do it, and that I should never be afraid to say that I'm having trouble with something.
Yeah, I think that vulnerability is a highly important message to show that as a strength. Abner, do you have some final words of wisdom before we close this?
By the way, Madison, I love that. I love what you said on the time thing. It does take time, and it brings me back to when I was in high school or in college, where I didn't even know what I needed, and it takes time. And I would say, don't be ashamed. Own it. Own up to it. They make fun of you. So what? You're not going to take this monster head on. You're going to bite its toe, and it's going to make a movement step by step. You're going to get there. You have to be aggressive about it. Don't be ashamed.
Love that. Own it. All right, guys. We're at the end of the interview. Thank you so much to all of you for taking the time to speak with us today. It was so enjoyable to get these peek into the mindset that all of you have developed by having these experiences. So thank you so much for taking the time to share with us today. We highly appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And for you listening, if you enjoyed this podcast, press subscribe on YouTube or in your podcast app, because that is showing the algorithms that this is an important conversation, so more people can learn about what it's like to have a learning disability and how they can become better advocates for themselves and for others. Thank you so much, and we'll see you in the next episode. What is great.com? That is the most common question that we get. And the shortest answer I can give you is that we are a company that is moving money from the online casino industry and donates it to charities that is helping the environment. The long answer, unfortunately, I don't have time to tell you today. But if you're curious, definitely Google what is great.com to learn more.